All right, Miss Amanda Browder, if you would mind introducing yourself.
Hi, my name is Amanda Browder, and I call myself a large-scale fabric installation artist.
All right. And if you wouldn't mind saying, how did you get to where you are now?
Ooh, many years. As a kid, I loved to sew, and I learned in 4-H in Missoula, Montana. When I was younger, I was always encouraged to be creative in some way, drawing, sculpture, painting, anything I wanted. And there was a huge community of people in Missoula, Montana that were very encouraging of the creative arts. We didn't have the internet back then, so you had to kind of like make your own fun since we were pretty isolated out in Missoula, Montana. So there was this sense as a kid that I could, if you're doing something creative, you could do it anywhere, as big as you want, go, no holds bar, just try it. Who cares? Why wait? Just do it. So when I left town and I went to undergrad and grad school and then later teaching at the Art Institute, I must tell you too, I was a math major a couple of years before I was an art major. So I didn't know much about being an artist. I thought you were just creative. I didn't know you could actually have it as a job. So during kind of the end of high school into undergrad, I realized I could be an artist full time. So that's where I started studying art, and I got my MFA, and I started teaching at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I moved to New York about 16 years ago, where I have a full-time studio, and I make art full time, and I cover buildings around the world.
All right. So I believe that covers you then. So, curiosity, how do you make money with your art?
That is a very direct question. How do you make money off your... It's a job. And I think people really have this misunderstanding about artists that, like, for example, how do I say this? When we make art, it's all fun all the time. And that it's not a job in some way. For us, it actually is a massive job. And there's lots of different ways that people make money. You can have a day job. You can work with institutions that write grants. You can sell objects. So all of these things are part of the biome and like economy of being an artist. So how I make money personally, all of the above. From writing grants, a big portion of what I do is I work with institutions and they write grants for the project that we're doing today. But I hope you understand, and I hope I'm talking to people who are listening, that it's really important to remember that art is an economy. It is in itself a day job. I mean, if you look at Art Splash, for example, and all the people that come here to sell work, or even people who do graphic design, it is the creative arts and background. So that question that comes up all the time, which I hate to tell you is a little bit of a rude question, because you wouldn't ask that of a person who's a banker, because you know how they make money. Or you wouldn't ask that with a teacher, because you know that's how they make money. But in the arts, it's not as obvious. And so that question becomes something like, how much money do you make? Or what age are you? Or how expensive is your home? It's a little offensive. And so I tell people when they ask that question, I know where you're coming from to ask that question, but think about it when you're asking it. And be a little bit more sensitive when asking that question to artists who are working their butts off. I will tell you, if you become an artist, you are not going to be rich. But I understand why you're asking that question, yes.
Well, apologies for...
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you've gotten that question asked plenty of times.
Many times, yes.
We're used to it. So, what was your first project?
Oh, yeah. First project. So the one that I talk about that is my first project in covering buildings is one in Chicago called Rapunzel. And it was, I think, 2006. And I saved all the fabric that I collected over the years, and I sewed it together, and threw it outside the apartment window of my apartment building, and called a bunch of friends and said, hey, I have this temporary public art piece, come and see it. It was up for 2 days, that's it. And a collection of people came. My favorite part was when people walked past it, and they didn't expect it to be in just this neighborhood area, this huge piece of art. It was definitely kind of a shocking moment. And it was in the winter, so things were cold and there were no leaves on the trees. It was very desolate. It was lack of color in Chicago. So to have this burst kind of falling out, cascading outside of a window was really great. It actually instigated me to keep doing projects as I went on. I did my first community-based project in New York City, in Brooklyn, and that was about introducing myself to a community through my contemporary practice. So not just, showing up and saying, here's my piece, everybody has to deal with it. Instead, I was like, hey, let's do this together. And I could introduce myself, and I had to get to know city council people, landlords, neighbors, all these different people. And that's how the community aspect kind of came about in each project that I've done in the past.
All right. So, next question, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite art piece?
Ooh, favorite. That's always hard because each one is so multifaceted. So, for example, I recently just did a project in Bruges for the Triennial Bruges, and that was in 2021. And it was in, I said Bruges. But the town itself is an UNESCO site, so it was never bombed during the World War I or II, and all the buildings are still there from the medieval 1600s, 1400s, all this time. So it just felt like we were going back in time when we were able to build this piece. Plus, it was during the shutdown, during the pandemic. So it was just this weird moment where this town was completely empty. I thought it was this teeny quiet town where nobody visited, and everybody that lived there was like, oh, no, we get like 3 million tourists a year. And I'm like, where are they? But what was great about it is we still had about 700 people come and show up within 1 month to come and sew with us, which is bonkers. And we stitched 3 building pieces, and then we did a big print that went onto the College of Europe and actually went onto the canal. So boats could go underneath, small boats could go under the piece, and you could see the fabric work right above you. So I think that was one of my favorites. By the way, I'm still friends with people from almost all of the projects that I've done, which is keeping in touch with people because it's important to me. I make good friendships when I hang out someplace.
Well, it's good to know that you've got some method of making friends.
Yes.
Yeah, that must be quite a story. So how'd you meet? Oh, yeah, this person came in from, where are you from again?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Well, I live in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm from Missoula, Montana.
So, in terms, probably easier to say you're just from New York.
I'll say I'm from New York. That sounds great.
But yes, this person from New York came in and covered the castle in cloth.
Exactly. It's true. And many times people remember it because they donated fabric that was really important to them, or they decided to sew for many, many days, and we hung out for days and getting to know each other, stitching. I mean, I like kind of interviewing people too at the sewing days just to find out who they are and what's their background and what they're interested in. It's part of the projects that I really enjoy. Yeah.
The social aspect.
Exactly. It's very much, yeah.
So, have you met anyone, really interesting?
Ooh, yeah, let me think. Oh, yes. I met this, let me see. Ooh. There are many stories, and I'm trying to think of, there's one that's bubbling up right now. This woman who I met, she was overseas, and I think she was in her, she was anywhere from her late 70s to late 80s or early 80s. She kept changing her age. And she told me this whole story about how she was, I'm almost nervous to tell this story because it's a little controversial. But she was accidentally part of this thing called the Romeo Project, where these Russian spies would woo women who lived in the United States and trying to get information from them. And she was from another country, but she was working for the UN. And she met this guy and thought they were in love. I mean, they dated for 7 years, and she had no idea that he had another family in Russia, and that he was a spy the whole time. And she didn't know it, and he just all of a sudden broke up with her, and she was like, okay. And then 20 years later, the government found out and was going to put her in prison because she had done espionage in some way. And she's like, but I didn't know. And she was exonerated. She didn't go to jail, but she was unfortunately asked to leave the country and to never come back. And so I met her overseas, but she was one of them. I mean, she still is one of the most vivacious, amazing women I've ever met, because she would dye her hair purple. She'd make all these different kind of things. She was just like an unbelievable person, a person I'd want to be someday in my life. I don't want to meet a Russian spy, but or date them. But she had no idea. So anyway, these are just some of the stories. I've met nudists. I've met people that are crooners that sing. I'm trying to think. Oh, there are people, and a lot of quilters. Like so many people that make quilts. My pieces are not quilts. I remind people it's not a quilt. But I love hanging out with people that sew because we have this kind of commonality. We get together, we hang out, and we have something we enjoy doing together.
So, what happens to all of your art pieces at the end of, the month or the year when they finally get taken down?
Totally. So I save everything. A lot of times people think because it's so big, it must be massive when you fold it up. But the fabric itself is only paper thin. And so when we fold it up and we archive it in my studio, it folds down into a small box. I mean, there's a piece I did, the first piece I did in Brooklyn when I moved there. It's a 3-story piece. It's maybe like 25 feet wide, and it fits into a large duffel bag. And so you can roll it up real small. I've taken it on the plane before. So one building to the next. And so yeah, everything gets saved. Sometimes I show these pieces in museums. And I talk about the people who were sewing. I have this archived book where people put their names that says, I've been here, and that goes with the piece forever. Even though it's textile and it's temporary, it's still a piece of art. And so I don't believe that cutting it up or turning it into something else is correct. I mean, all paintings are made on fabric. We see textile everywhere. And we're not cutting those pieces up. So I'm really pushing audience members to think about how textile can be a contemporary art piece and not just a functional object.
So you say that you've shown some of your works in museums.
Mm-hmm.
Any prominent ones?
Well, I've shown the piece that was a section of the church piece. So that's one that people remember me for. It was a piece called Spectral Locus, and it was 2016, I believe. And it was through the Albright Knox Museum, and it covered 3 buildings. And it was the Richmond and Ferry Church, the Broadway and Fillmore location, and then the building at the Albright Knox Museum. So after that piece came down, I showed a piece in it was at Columbia College in Chicago, in downtown Chicago, and they wanted to have a section of it. So we actually showed the pieces, the photographs of all 3 pieces, the book, and then also the draped piece, which was really nice. I have actually shown pieces more than once, too, on different buildings. So that's something I've done as well. Beyond just interior museums, but also galleries or different groups will be like, we'd like to show your work. So I had a little mini retrospective actually in Missoula, Montana at the university. And we put 3 pieces up around town that had been previously shown in different cities around the world.
You say different cities around the world. So you've been basically everywhere, or?
Basically everywhere. I've done 28 buildings, I think. I always miscount, but because sometimes one town will have 5, 6 locations, and so for me that's a different building each one. But around the world, yeah. So Belgium, Japan, Spain, a lot in the United States, Canada. Yeah, it's just a few, but yeah, New York.
So largely restricted to the U.S., but...
Well, it's just because I'm here. I'm a Brooklyn-based artist, and so more people know about me here. And
I do apologize.
No, it's okay.
Okay, and resume recording. Yes, after that brief interruption, sometimes there's some phone calls which you can't exactly, or don't really want to turn down.
Yes, exactly.
Were we in the middle of something?
Oh, boy. I don't remember, unfortunately.
Yes, despite the fact that this appears instantaneous for you, viewer or listener, that was around 10 minutes for us, so during which time human memory has proven itself to be quite fallible.
We might have been talking about, I mean, something that I remember was talking about like where the pieces went after the fact.
Yes,
and
that's what we
around
had
the
been
world,
discussing. You've been
unique places.
a couple places in Europe, but mostly within the United States.
Exactly.
The U.S. is interesting, but first let's go ahead and focus on the European things because
Okay.
that's, well, comparatively to the U.S., probably feels more exotic.
I guess so. I mean, I've been to Eastern Africa, Western Africa also, and to Liberia.
Really?
For a couple, yes, yeah. I have friends who are doctors, and they were like, we need artists to come with these doctors because many times doctors, when they get into their field, they just get very rigid and very intense. And my friend at the time, who was a doctor, he's like, I'm going to bring you because we need artists to shake up the scene. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to the hospital in the middle area. And he's like, you'll figure it out. So I brought a couple pieces, and we actually went up to so we flew to Liberia in Monrovia, and we put up 2 pieces up on the Decor Hotel, which is on this big hill in Monrovia. And then also going to the hospital deep into Phoebe, which is like farther into the country, and we draped a couple of water towers with pieces that I've done. And then I hung out with some people in the neighborhood. I met this photographer there. We did a photo shoot with one of the most famous basketball stars of Liberia. And so I felt very cool. I got to hang out with him. But really encouraging. Kiki, who is the photographer, he was interested in letting Americans know that it's not as terrifying as people think it is. It's an all-beached country. It's so gorgeous. It is a third world country. Poverty is very, very heavy there. But at the same time, they do have hotels. It's surfing. It's a massive surfing area. And the community of people is really wonderful and generous. So, yeah, visit.
Do you want to pull
Yeah, a little
bit?
closer.
Yeah. Just noticing that, yeah,
My levels are a little lower.
a little lower than they were when we first started recording.
That makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Chair moved.
But yeah, so I mean, Europe has always been unique. I did a project in Spain. We didn't have the public sewing days in that one. It was this different thing where we did this project at an art fair, and I made this massive hangout area where it was all these different big pillows that were in the shape of monsters. And it was supposed to be for kids, like there was this play area, but then it became this location where everybody would go to nap and sleep. I had one woman sleep there for like 3 hours. She just like went poof into the piece and then was out cold. They all had the smell of cologne at the end, like everybody's weird smells. And that was great. I mean, I loved Spain. If I could go back there, I would in a heartbeat. So future projects.
Well, things to look forward to.
Yep.
So you're saying that people in Spain would take a nap at your art piece.
Yes.
That is not something I would see in the United States.
I think you would. It just depends on where. And if there was an opportunity. I mean, if you had a chair somewhere or a beanbag is very similar to this poofy sculpture, but we're told you can allowed to sit on this sculpture. I can see you doing it.
Oh, maybe not me, but
Yes,
I guess perhaps some people.
that's very true.
I suppose you've traveled around the world. Have you encountered any interesting differences between locations, like
Yeah.
cultural or?
Oh, of course. I mean, my favorite part about Bruges was that they understood the depth of time. You know, when I was telling you about all these buildings being from the 1500s, I was sewing right across from the location where, say, if people do construction and they do a big dig and they find pots from like the 1200s or 1100s, all those pots and bones and everything, archaeological dig things, go to this building that was right next to us. And so we did a tour of the building, and you know, these are pots that if we found them in the United States, it's way beyond, it would be indigenous, it would be Native American based material. The colonialists that came here in the 1600s or 1400s, it's young for them. And so here they have this pot from like the year 1000 or 1200, and she's just holding it like, yeah, here it is. To me, I'm like, oh my gosh, put gloves on, take care of it. And they're like, we have thousands of them. They're like, that whole back room are just bones. And I'm like, whoa. So there was just this different kind of understanding about the length of time. In the United States, we only go back to the 1400s and Western times, when the colonialists came here. If we had paper documentation of indigenous and Native American lives before the white people showed up, we might be able to go deeper, but we don't a lot of times. We just have petroglyphs and wall paintings and any kind of information that we get archivally before that. And our culture has not supported that for a really long time. So there, it's very different.
Yeah. I've been to a few countries in Europe, and I mean, I have at the very least, probably the oldest thing I've seen was, I was going to say Pompeii, but I have actually seen Stonehenge. Curious, have you ever been to the UK?
Oh, I have been to the UK. I visited UK, but I'm laughing because when I was in the United States, I went to this wedding, and I went to Foamhenge. So not Stonehenge, but Foamhenge. This artist made a life-size replica of Stonehenge, but made out of styrofoam. It was really funny. It still exists. You can look it on Google Maps. It's like an oddity. But the only time I went to England was when I went to a wedding in Liverpool, and that was it. And then a stopover in London, but I did get to see the Concorde before they decommissioned it. It was going to be their last flight. And I looked out the plane, and they're all like, everybody look, that's
Concorde, isn't that the hypersonic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Soviet hypersonic aircraft, right?
Exactly, yep. Mm-hmm. I felt very lucky I got to see it. But then that was its last flight. It was on its way to do its last flight.
Yeah, I kind of wish that those, I wouldn't mind having had a hypersonic trip to Europe.
I know.
Instead of those 12-hour flights.
I know.
On the other hand, most of the world doesn't actually let you have hypersonic aircraft in their airspace.
Exactly.
You can only really do hypersonic over the ocean.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's hypersonic, it's loud.
Very loud, yes.
So
you don't want to be woken up by that sound going over top of you.
Yeah. And the other problem is that if you really need to be connected to someone in flight, well, there's in-flight Wi-Fi.
Exactly. There you go. Maybe it'll be space. We'll just be going up and out to the orbit, do a couple rounds, and then land somewhere else.
Oh, have you heard of ideas of using suborbital hops? You literally use a rocket in order to do a suborbital hop to anywhere else on the planet. Theoretically faster than anything we've done so far.
Love it.
Though probably extremely expensive.
Yes.
Unless, well, maybe a hybrid air-breathing rocket could probably do it.
That's
a single-stage
pretty cool.
orbit or something.
There are goals for us in life that we could try to do.
Yeah, the future always looks so bright.
Yes.
Just careful not to be completely blinded by it, because
That's
there's
so
always
true.
those things in the background.
Yep, that's true. Well, see, we'll be able to do it when we're like 80, maybe.
Hey, don't worry. You just every year they make it you can live a little bit longer. You just gotta live until per year life expectancy increase is more than
Exactly.
1 year.
Oh, I like this idea. Or have you seen those things, that information about the people who want to freeze themselves cryogenically, like froze their bodies so that they can live maybe or be woken up later in life?
As long as you're careful with the brain and you don't
Yeah.
do any serious damage. I mean,
Exactly.
theoretically, you should be able to repair it.
Exactly.
It just requires technology that we only have in the theoretical.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you might be frozen for a while, but
Yeah.
As long as the brain is maintained at liquid nitrogen temperatures, you might. The odds are not zero, which
Exactly.
is sufficient for most people.
I know. There's a whole group that believes this. It's kind of awesome. And you can go and you can either have your whole body frozen or just your head. One of the two.
I'd probably just have my head frozen.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's something that I would look at.
Yeah.
Whenever I finally get around to drafting myself a will, that's probably something I'm going to deal with, is
Ooh.
getting it set up.
Exactly. I
Yes.
highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of cool to find out what happens later in life.
Yeah, I figure that'd probably wake me up like 3,000 or something.
Yeah.
You know? real thing, though, would be how much would culture change in that time?
Oh, so much. I would imagine a lot. I mean, if you think about 1,000 years ago then and now, a lot has changed in that time period.
Yeah. And even across just the decades, the internet,
Yeah.
like I've said, I don't think we've ever created anything which is truly just malignant. It is merely, technology is just an amplification of the human spirit. The internet, like, yeah, we got all this vile stuff, but like, yeah, that's just amplifying what's already there. Same with all the positivity and all the capacity for learning. Like,
I totally agree.
like everything you've done, like
Yeah.
you would not be able to do this 100 years ago. Maybe.
It'd be more difficult.
But you know, with the internet, with aircraft, with this interconnected world, you can.
Exactly. I can travel different places in a much more efficient way. I mean, we do have people that did travel, but it was much harder. I mean, when you went to Europe, if you lived in the United States or vice versa, you were on a boat for like 2 weeks or a month, depending on how slow it went. Now we can go to Australia, you know, in one
13
day.
hours
Oh.
or so.
Yeah.
It's fun to think that it took them less time, the Apollo program, to go to the moon and come back than it did for any 1800 sailor to go across the ocean.
Totally. It's all relative in some way. You think about what, so the distance, so now we're going to Mars. That should be the next, like the quick trip. It'll be like the long trip first, and then maybe in 1,000 years, it'll be like, oh yeah.
Well, if we had nuclear rockets, then it would
Yeah.
be
A lot faster.
only a couple weeks.
Ah.
The problem is, with a nuclear rocket, you need to get nuclear material
Yeah.
into space. And the problem with rockets is they sometimes explode. And if something happens to explode with nuclear material on it, that is what we in the business like to call a dirty bomb. So,
Very bad.
yes, it is dull plus ungood. So, until we can fix that whole, well, I mean, then again, with what SpaceX has been doing, they've been launching rockets that, it's impressive. What
They're
it's been
physically trying it. I mean, they have the funding that they can actually do that. I mean, I feel like if our government did have that interest in being kind of, spending that much money and building all that stuff and letting it blow up, maybe we go a little further. I mean, you kind of have to do these things in some way, I would imagine. I'm not a rocket scientist. But I do know as an artist, you always have to problem solve and figure stuff out. And it's better just to do it and find out what the mistakes are than to guesstimate all the time.
Yep, as long as nobody gets hurt.
That's a
So you
huge
just
part
gotta
of
make
it.
sure that you
100%, yes.
do it from just a bit of a distance away.
Yes.
But yeah, after we went to the moon, we just kind of stopped doing anything. I mean, we had the space shuttle, but
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, the space shuttle was kind of bad.
Why
Like-
is that?
Okay, so you know how it was supposed to have like a really fast turnaround time and stuff?
Right.
So would you believe me if I said that there was basically only a set of engines that was swapped between the shuttles and refurbed?
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, those, I think they're like J2s or something.
Uh-huh.
I'm probably misremembering what exactly they are, but they would have to refurb them, which took months, and they would swap them between space shuttles.
Whoa.
And on top of that, once the shuttles were effectively decommissioned, they were basically just relying on cannibalized spare parts to keep them in service.
It makes sense. I get it.
And
Full sustainability. Recycling.
Yeah. And now to think about it, they're actually basically lost technology. Like, I mean, we know how they worked more or less,
Yeah.
but would you believe me if I said we cannot construct another Saturn V? We cannot
Really?
rebuild the Apollo mission
How come?
because we lost the tooling and all the schematics. Like, they're gone. The people who were responsible for the project, a lot of them are dead now.
Right. I was going to say time has passed. Oof.
It's
You
strange.
hope for the future. I mean, India just went to the moon.
Yeah.
They just made it. So
So-
someone in the world, doesn't have to be the people in the US.
Yeah, it's just it's important that if you want to keep going forward, you can't just go forward and then stop, because
Right.
otherwise, well, it would appear that eventually you'll start going backwards.
That's
whether you want to
true.
or not.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I'm sorry I'm distracting it to myself, but like I think about that in making work. Like I've always thought about, okay, what happens if I die? Would I regret it tomorrow? All the stuff that I've done. So I push myself a little further all the time because I'd rather know if I'm going to leave this world that I've done everything to the maximum so far. If I passed away tomorrow, I would be fine. I did a lot of good stuff so far. I have more to do. And it is strange, like in your kind of midlife of making art, is that you start doing this tipping point of like, okay, so now we're getting closer to death than birth. And so what does that mean as you as an artist? And, you know, does that trajectory change? Do you update what you've done so far? Do you do all new things, or you just like keep going? And so that's where I'm at right now, trying to figure some stuff out.
Your little midlife crisis.
Heck yeah, man. Welcome to Over the Hill.
Have you panicked and bought an expensive car?
Heck no. You would be depressed in seeing my 1995 Ford Explorer.
I don't think I would be. Yeah, honestly. Yeah. Have you ever heard about the thing where there was this great idea where basically all cars have to meet certain fuel efficiency milestones? But if you don't build a car and instead build a light truck, you don't have to meet those fuel efficiency milestones.
No way!
Yeah, so the Jeep.
Is that why we have all these crazy trucks everywhere?
Yeah, that's why we have all these ridiculous massive cars.
God, they're so ugly.
Yeah, because, you know, we can't go with doing all that environmental stuff. It costs money.
Mm.
I know.
Yeah, right. So we'll just like burn the earth up more. More distraction, more sadness. Oh.
Yeah.
I do understand the need for a truck, but not at the level that I feel like people have been using.
And the fun thing is that these trucks, like, there's people who do need pickup trucks and stuff.
Of course.
They don't need these massive Titans.
No.
They actually need the stuff that they were building that they don't build anymore.
Exactly. Ugh. Thank you, car companies.
Yeah, capitalism.
I know.
You ever heard the motto that, well, I don't want the YouTube gods to go ahead and smite this thing down, so let's just say poop rises.
It floats.
Yeah.
Floats to the top. Unfortunately, I know. I have a lot of, there's a lot of feelings about that, but we'll see what happens next. I don't know.
Well, I think in general it feels like the trajectory is always going up.
Yes, of course.
You just got those speed bumps.
Yes. No, it's for sure.
And
I mean, we will see what happens. I mean, maybe if I was to start thinking bigger in my work, I have to do something where I can hang it from blimps, or just like this massive fabric piece that's, I mean, there's these artists that people always connect me to, which is Christo and Jean-Claude. They were a couple, and they both have passed away at this point. But they did the gates. Most people know about the gates in New York City. And they used to cover buildings, like kind of wrap buildings. Not so much drape, but wrap them in fabric.
were they the ones who covered an entire cotton meadow or something like that? Because I know there was an artist who literally covered like an entire landscape in cloth.
Yes. It might have been them. I mean, they literally went across the state of California. So from one end to the next. And actually it was very controversial right when it went to the water, because many environmentalists didn't want that fabric to go into the water. They're like, you're going to damage ecosystems and this kind of thing. And so they technically didn't do it. They were sued many, many times for many different things. And they did take the photo and then put it right back. But they were amazing artists. They just had such a large scale kind of view on going big for contemporary art, in my opinion. I just went and saw their piece, their last piece. They had both passed away. Like Christo had just passed away, I think the year before this piece went up, or 2 years. But so I went and saw in Paris the Arc de Triomphe completely wrapped in fabric. It was amazing. I mean, it was kind of a shimmery material, so when you took a photograph of it in the sunshine, it looked like a charcoal drawing. It looked fake in some way. It looked so cool. But they've been working on it since the 60s. Like, that's when they first came up with that idea. So a lot of these ideas, especially in public art, take so long to build. I mean, even this project that I'm working on in Sioux City, we started almost 2 years ago talking about this. Like, it's always a long, extended project. When people come to me, I'm like, okay, let's think a 3-year process. How can we work on this? Between grants and setting up organization of people to come and sew, and working with partners and installation and structural engineers and the building and the city and all these things. It all comes together slowly but surely. But I do like to think big, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, go big or go home.
There you
So,
go.
when you say these things take years to manifest,
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of weird to think about. I mean, the project you're doing right now, covering the Sioux City Art Center in fabric. So how long has this been in the works for?
Well, we've probably been talking for about 2 years, I'm guessing. Year and a half, 2 years, because we had to write, first it's like an introduction, then it's a collaboration with the curator, who here we have Christopher Atkins, who is the new curator of the Sioux City Art Center, and he's bringing new people, and he had seen my work in the past and was like, hey, do you want to do a project? I was like, yeah, let's make a plan. And so he wrote the grant, which is a National Endowment for the Arts grant, and we got that grant, plus the Elizabeth Firestone Graham Foundation and the Gilchrist Foundation. And then slowly but surely that came together, so we started making a plan for the next year. I did a site visit, I think in June or July of 2023. So that's like photographing the buildings, seeing where locations people are going to check out, and I build as a design that we can start working towards. But yeah, it takes a long time and multiple people.
And then we're busy sewing together all of the strips, and then it's not going to be here until next August of 2024.
Exactly, yes. It takes time. I mean, I think a lot of times you go to the museum and you only see the pieces on the wall. You don't know how it's made, who the people are, unless you know what the show's about. And as an audience member, I think there's a lot of barriers that go into going to a museum, like interests about, like, if I go there, will I know what's happening? If you don't feel comfortable going to a museum, it's not as exciting to go, especially if you're not interested in the arts, like, all the time. I mean, I'm not a person that loves musicals, but I will go every once in a while just to kind of like put my toe in the experience and be like, okay, this is what people are interested in. Good to know. Or if I hear about unique ones. And it's also because it's the creative arts. But with this project, when we have these public sewing days and working with construction workers and all these different layers of people, the experience opens up a little bit more. People get a window into how pieces are made. So when the piece shows up, they can talk about it. They have information. They can talk to their friends about it, the project. And like, you know, you coming to the sewing day, you can actually tell people, oh, this is what happened. This is what experience you'll expect when you go there. And that's my piece right there. And I appreciate that. It gives people a depth beyond just like, I know this.
Yeah. There's a certain tactility or tactileness to something that you've contributed to.
Exactly.
It's one thing to see something and be like, wow, that's cool. It's another thing to see something and be like, pointing at it and said, I helped with that, or I did something for that.
Exactly. I made that. I hope people say that. I mean, breaking up the ownership is really important with these projects. It's not just my project. Like, I've designed it and I've set up the system that helps build it and created opportunities for the Art Center to connect with the community. I mean, many of the people that work here have never been to the locations that we're having public sewing days. So it really helps everybody in town. Like, you know, there's the Ho-Chunk building across the street, there's the Art Sucks gallery right over here, and just in our sewing days, more and more people are going to those locations because I've been talking about them. The artists are coming to the sewing days. It becomes this meeting area where creatives can get together and talk to each other. I mean, it's very common for artists to stay at home and just work in their studio and not go out and do the work, which is like meeting people. And so this gives people an opportunity to, you know, get more in touch with the creative arts. Honestly, the whole purpose in the end is to try to get more people from the city to be excited about the art process, supporting artists, supporting the museum, even just to go see stuff, not even like monetarily, but really just to like feel more comfortable and part of the whole group. Cultural group.
I guess it's something to note then that your events must be pretty good for communities because they help, I guess, enrich the community.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's my goal. I mean, anytime you go into a space, you have no idea what to expect. I mean, a community could embrace you. A community can kind of be very quiet to get to know you and then slowly open up. And my job is to try to work on that. I mean, I try to go to people's homes for dinner. Any invitation to do something, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Because the more I can interconnect people, the more I feel people here have a sense of collective creative unity. Being connected via creative process is not as common as most people do. I mean, we have these stereotypes, and I think they're horrible pieces when, like, murals are like, kids, come and put your handprints on the wall with paint. And I'm like, boo. It's too distant. It's like you're still keeping people isolated as their individual and then showing as a collective. Here, we're actually taking a little bit of time. I mean, everybody has a little bit of like energy putting into the piece, and that energy is shown by how kind of gorgeous it is in the end when we all put it together. I don't know. That's what I hope. You never know.
So, of course, the goal is that these are always positive events for communities.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a community reject you or negative?
No, not really, because negative is such a specific word. I mean, I've worked with groups and I've decided not to work with them because they did not want to do the community outreach. And so I work really hard to push art institutions to know if they want to use that word, community, in their description of what they are, that they need to push those boundaries. It's very common for art institutions to say, we're community related, being that we have a space that people can come to. And I'm like, but that's not community. That's just a space. I mean, a store is then a community space. The police place is a community place. People go there, so what? It doesn't mean that you're engaging with the community. So for me, each of these projects really pushes people who are in the art institution to really own up to what that word is. Beyond just offering classes or beyond doing a tour for anybody that wants to show up, it's actually better if we like walk to a place and say hi and introduce ourselves and be the artist presence within the community versus just saying, come to us, we're over here, when you're ready. That's not a connection. So, yeah.
So curious, for the amount of bureaucracy that goes into all these, have you ever had a project just flat out die, effectively?
Come on, man. What's that question? Flat out die? No. I mean, because what is that question interested in finding out? I mean, is it about the failure of a project? Do you know what I'm saying when you ask that question?
Yeah, let's reframe it. Have you ever had anything fail?
No. I mean, failure is... The word failure is so specific to everybody in different way. Like, I have people come to the sewing days and they're like, oh, I'm not good at sewing. I'm going to fail at it. And I'm like, oh my God. What does that mean exactly to you? And so to say something fails is part of the art process. Like, you need to embrace a little bit of failure. Things don't work out, for sure, like all the time. Every project, something has either dropped through and you just brainstorm a way to fix it. So not really. Everything's gone well so far, but there's always been hiccups, things that people do that you're like, oh. Like one group, to give you a sense of trouble, how about that? Someone hired, when we had to install a huge amount of projects, and they hired people who only knew how to put up paintings, not work on the building. So I had to learn how to drive a crane that day. And for a week, I was on this crane in this building and having to go through two skinny little tall brick chimneys and trying not to hit them and tip them over. Was the most stressful thing I've done in a long time. But now I am OSHA certified. I can be on a cherry picker crane and wander around. I know how to do it. It's been a while, but I definitely can do it.
Yeah.
But these are things that go with the job, and that's what makes it exciting too, is that you have to problem solve. I remind people in schools, and I was like, the reason we need arts is to create problem solving skills. It can be in anything, medical, teachers, you name any job has problem solving. Something will happen where you're like, oh man, we need to fix this right now. How do we do it? The light bulb just fell out. How do we fix it? You just have, it's brainstorming. Yeah. anyway.
So I guess that would be an example of a project turning out not quite how you expected. Any other examples of that? Since that's more of a positive, and I'm sure you've had.
I mean, there's all these different things. It's like, I can't think of anyone right now. I mean, wind is our least favorite friend, and so in Las Vegas we had like an 80-mile-an-hour, or tornado came by in Grand Rapids, and I pat myself on the back because there were sadly roofs ripped off on people's homes, but somehow my piece was okay. Which I was scared. I mean, and in Las Vegas a piece did pop down because I installed my side correctly. The other person didn't want to listen to me and how it was installed. But these are, you know what, I say all this stuff, but I don't see it as a failure. I think it's just more the storyline of the projects. When you're working with people, like collaboratively, you have to give stuff up. You can't be in control all the time. And it's the same thing with donations of fabric and sewing days and working with the institutions and construction. Things ebb and flow so much that you just have to kind of go with the flow. And at the end, you're just like, it's all about the photograph. We just need a good photograph. Because that's the thing people look at forever. I mean, I had a project that I put up for 2 days. It took a year to make. And it was all about the photograph. That was it.
A year just for something up to be 2 days? Get a nice photo of it.
Of course. Because that's the thing people look at. Even if it was up for 2 months, what's the difference? You didn't get to see it. It was only people that were in that city at that time for that short period of thing. I mean, everybody tells me, I wish these pieces were up for longer. And I was like, but think about it. If they were up for longer, they might be broken. They might not look as good. 2, if you take things down sooner, it leaves people wanting. They start seeing that building as something different. I mean, we get so used to going from house to job every day and like ignoring all the buildings that are in between us. And so when this piece goes up, it really shocks you into like being like, oh, right, that exists. And then when you take it down, people are like, wait, where was that? What was that? Why is that there? Is there more? Is there a different piece? There's all these questions that are built afterwards. Not just like, okay, that was great. I saw it. Check. You know what I'm saying?
There's always a bit of a permanent impact on the community.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I'm going back in 2 years back to Buffalo where we did the church piece that I was talking about earlier. And they're having their 10-year anniversary for the AK Public Arts group, which I was part of. And I'm so excited to return because I know I'll find those people that we hung out with and sewed with, and we'll be able to celebrate and think about what we did back then. And there's this kind of memory that goes with that project. So I'm excited to do that piece, put it up in the museum.
And you'll, of course, get to see how things changed in 10 years.
Exactly. I mean, each piece is a time capsule of who's here and at this location. They're all site-specific. So in 20 years, Sioux City will look different in some way. You know, different people, different buildings, different people at the art center. Everything ebbs and flows. And so I like that these pieces are here for this moment in time. And that's why the book is so important with people signing their names, because I was like, here's the people here right now. Yeah. We'll see what happens next. It's going to be very exciting for the future.
Yeah. Awkward silence. Thinking if I can come.
Silence is good.
Sometimes silence.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, it's the awkward pauses where there's just minutes or a minute. So I'm trying to think of anything else. I guess I'm gonna have to start.
This is a good conversation. I really appreciate it. My favorite part, too, is talking about space. I'm excited to know you know so much about rockets and everything.
Yeah. When I was young, I thought I'd be a scientist. And instead, I'm an engineer, which I guess is adjacent, so.
It is, yes. Oh, man. So my day job, I used to sell eyeglasses for like 20 years. It was a good day job. So I taught, but I also sold eyewear. And engineers were the worst when they came in to get their eyeglasses adjusted, because one side they're like, oh, now it's a little tight on this side. Oh, it's now a little tight on that side. And we're like, ah. Sometimes I go in the back and just like hold them into the air and come back and be like, here, try this. And they're like, oh, so much better. It's so much better. I was like, I know. It's mean, I know. But there was such a like you would see where it was balanced. And they were like, there's something else wrong. I know we can get it better. And sometimes it's human psychology. You can't fix that.
Yeah, the thing where you got the cat, and the cat won't eat the food, so you shake the bowl. And
Exactly.
The cat's like, yeah, I wonder if I've ever been like that. I think I have one or two times with glasses coming in to get them adjusted.
I get it. It's a silly thing to say. It's not a for sure for every single one. As an engineer, I'm telling you, there are examples that it's a failure as well. Some engineers are very nice, and they're like, close enough, this is good, bye.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, future projects, I think I have a project in Germany next year as well, in Schmallenberg. It's a fiber festival, so I'm excited to do that. And then at the Albright Knox Museum, we'll be putting up, the 10-year anniversary in 2025. So things in the future. I hope people come and sew. I mean, we'll be here, in March next year and July in Sioux City. So how was your experience at the sewing days?
I've had a good experience at the sewing days.
Yeah?
I had good conversation and a good
Nice.
experience.
Oh, that's good.
I guess I think I will leave it. I will say, let's see, what was it? Was it August that you'll have it set up?
Yes, the piece will be up 2024 for Art Splash, and it's our 30th anniversary too. So that's another big reason why. It's a big celebration.
At the Art Center in Sioux City, Iowa.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you happen to be hearing it and it is not yet August 2024, well, if you can happen to stop on by in Sioux City, Iowa, and you can see it, then come on. Otherwise, if it's like 2025 or something and that you're in the way distant future, well, I'm sure it looks very cool.
Look at the photo. It'll be on my website. It'll be Instagram.
There'll
all
probably be
the things.
something in the art
Oh,
center
of
that
course.
stays for a while.
Let's hope so. At least the love that we have of sewing with each other.
Well, thank you for showing.
Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah,
We'll see you next year.
indeed.